name is Eugene Ray, Gene, and this is my life on these tables. I call them metaphysical graphics. They have to do with my inner life, all of the wonderful things that have happened to me, and what I've inherited, genetic memory, you may be familiar with, has stimulated my architecture. And next week at this time, on Tuesday, I am going to have a similar exhibition as you see here of the metaphysical graphics of my architectural graphics. And I hope you might see how these images, the life and expressions in these images, stimulated my professional work. And there is one other factor, a very important one, that stimulated that work, and it is a sighting I made at age 15 of a UFO. And I tell you, when you have an experience like that, you realize what you thought was reality is not entirely reality. So it expanded my perspective of what it is that we're dealing with on this planet. And great painting, who are we, where are we from, where do we go? And I'm very honored, my wife Marianne here and I, to be with you here at the Chateau. And most of you, I'm sure, about our age roughly, and you have these same thoughts. Who are we, where are we from, where do we go? Now, one of the factors of this that interests me is, what do you do with your life? And I know that each one of you had interesting lives, and you could, if you did graphics, you could put on an exhibition like this too. There's a new group meeting here at the Chateau, and I hope you'll be part of it, that talks about each person's life here. And it's really interesting how people have these lives that are fascinating. So I'm not trying to tell you that my life is any better than anybody else. It's just that I had the means to document it. I inherited a lot of artistry from my French ancestors in New Orleans. My mother was an artist, and she inherited a lot of that from her parents and grandparents and so on. I had a brother who was a professional painter. I'm very grateful to have had this French heritage, and I will talk about it as time goes on. Now, the game plan here is this. I'd like you to look at these tables. You can take your time, go around, and absorb the visuals on the tables, and then I'm going to talk about them. And then finally, the wrap-up here is you can select a graphic that are in the acetate protectors like this, that you are particularly interested in. And we will videotape those so they're on the screen. And this videotape is going to be on YouTube, so it will go around the world. I'm happy to tell you I have a number of videotapes on YouTube, and you might want to look at those as time goes on. I will tell you that Facebook has been very good to me, and you will notice on the table here several Facebook books. This is all of my life and work in this for 1 year, and I have invested, I think I have about 5 of them here, these Facebook books. You're welcome to look through those. I appreciate if you don't touch the graphics that are unprotected, particularly the large 11 by 17 graphics like this. The ones that are in acetate enclosures, protectors, like these, you can pick up and look more careful. And ultimately you can select one that we will put on the videotape a bit later, and I can maybe expand on what you're looking at. You're going to see in these graphics a lot of symbology, a lot of references, and a certain amount of my work. As you well know, perhaps, I've been very fortunate in my architectural career. I've taught at 3 universities, San Diego State, for 30 years, and I have quite an interesting life, which next Tuesday at this time I will talk about. Energy in architecture. The French government invited me to be on their committee, Architecture and Energy, in Nancy University in France, and I was very honored with that. But we'll go into that next week. Now, much of the focus here is in Louisiana environments, in Italian environments, in French environments. This one, I was asked if there was some French, this one in particular. There's a lot of these inside references, and I'm sure people that you've never known before. I put my family, my brother here and this one, and friends into these collages. Collage, of course, a French term, and something that my mother practiced before I did. I have upstairs in our apartment a collage my mother made. So why don't you get up and walk around the room at this point and look at these tables and try to absorb as best you can, and then I can answer questions. If there's some questions as you're looking, I will respond to those.
You'll let me
This
know.
will get you on your feet,
I have to miss it.
and you can see these much better. I appreciate that.
This book open.
Yes, this is open. This is a different book, but these are the Facebook books. And you can have these published of your Facebook postings. Yeah, thanks, thank you. Oh, wow. Wow, that's great. If you have questions, I'm happy to respond. As I say, don't touch the paper graphics. Just draw my attention. I will walk up to you and try to answer your question. Yes. Good, 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 good. I appreciate that. This is a photographer in New Orleans by the name of Pops Witzel. Very famous New Orleans photographer who I have a great deal of admiration for. And the references are New Orleans environment and one of my own designs. So it's a collage of interrelated elements. Well, my family were there in 1739. Personally, I arrived when I was 1 year old. Well, I came to California 35 years later. Yes. Tropic, T-R-O-P-I-C. T-R-O-P-I-C. Tropic syndrome. The tropics mean a lot to me. I know many of you don't like heat, but I do. And I write about it quite a lot. Heat, water, soil are important elements that interface and create a syndrome of plants. The plant kingdom means a lot to me. There's a book I recommend to my students for years called The Secret Life of Plants. The Secret Life of Plants is amazing. Plants are much more sentient than you may think. They've discovered that they can actually electronically trigger a garage door through mental telepathy with plants. Any other questions? Well, something that you might like. Now, beauty is an important factor in my orientation. And yes, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But generally, people don't fail to identify beauty in people or environment. Beauty is one of the most powerful factors of existence. It's so powerful that people are afraid to talk about it. As an architect, beauty has meant a lot to my life.
I like that one. Reminds me of my trip in
Yeah, exactly. You're not far off. That indeed is from Central America.
It's HDMI 1.
You can see that tropical elements are important, tropical buildings are important to my existence
It's
and
your
life
cord
on
right
this
there.
earth.
There's signal going through that. Something here is not working okay. Because if the line doesn't work, this is what happened. You get a no signal message. But right now we have signal.
Hello, Effie. Hi, how are you? Thank you for coming, huh? Yes.
See? There you
Yes.
see? You're sending me signal right now. Look, if I don't get any signal,
Yes.
what happens? Are you
That is a
recording?
very old plantation house designed by an architect by the name of Collins.
Yeah, when you record, it
Wood,
doesn't project.
entablature above.
Yeah, so are you gonna
The body of the
record?
building is brick,
Yeah, it's not.
columns of bricks. Those were square, but I will tell you that building is in ruins. So many of the plantation houses in Louisiana are in ruins, in one state of ruin or another.
That's what he wants to do.
Wood is very fragile in the Gulf South because of the hurricane.
Yeah, so
Realize what it takes to do.
So much of the architecture has been lost in the tropics of the Gulf South because of hurricanes. Hurricanes are a powerful energy factor. It depends on how much money you have. They're made of wood for most people. But those with more wealth built stone or brick buildings. More brick than stone. Stone is not commonly available in the southern states. Yes. This is one of my favorite of these collages right here. The fire. Yeah, this is in an ancient, a very old cemetery in Baton Rouge, a national cemetery. That's just foliage. That's one of the oldest photographs I have ever taken. I was probably about 16 years old when I made that. Yes, no, you do see references.
She said, no, that apartment.
yeah, she's on the other side.
Very good. Fireballs of the Eucharist.
I think it's by Friday.
My friend Walker Percy, the famous writer and poet, used that term in one of his books, Fireballs of the Eucharist.
Yeah, we left you there, yeah. But last Thursday, the housekeeper was sick and went home.
The Poets' Morning in New Orleans.
In the garage and talked to them.
From the dryer. Okay, do and continue.
Okay,
The term transcendental means a lot to me. Well, it means that it's above just the average. There was a very famous quotation out of France at the highest level only the
I like it though.
only the I'm trying to think of the exact word. 5 degrees of transcendence. That is a quotation out of poetry. Yes. Yes. Thank you so much. I didn't say anything about the collaged photographs on the table, but I'm very grateful and liked these photographic collages. Thank you very much. Yes, cars are important. My father drove the first cars in Louisiana, and he was a devoted mechanic all of his adult life. I grew up, well, my family were from New Orleans, but my parents lived in Baton Rouge. We would go back and forth. And Baton Rouge I knew until I was about 25 years old, when I set up my architectural practice near New Orleans. Yes. Yes. I'm happy to respond to any questions you have. A tour. A trip. I'm going to say a little bit at this point about correspondence art. You may not be familiar with correspondence art, but it's quite a strong movement in the art world. And on this table, you will see envelopes that contained my correspondence art. I would mail to friends all over the world. This group was sent to my wife, Mary Ann. And I have some of the actual graphics that were in that envelope. Collage letters.
Oh, interesting. That's really who would send letters like that. Yes.
That's me as a young boy.
But those weren't just photographs and you put them on there.
That's right. I added the text, I collaged the photographic images, so it became a synergetic whole. The photos are stronger with the text, and vice versa.
It's very personal.
Well, you know, I'm glad, Evie, as a poet, you sensitive and abstracted that idea. That's very good. I think that person involvement is extremely important. You as a poet do that.
I found out what the 5 degrees were. Light, heat, utility, water, and I forgot.
I had forgotten that myself, so thank you. Now, yes, that's okay.
Go ahead.
Well, it's hard to do this, but I do have 2 building designs in this book called Visionary Architecture. And I didn't mark the page, unfortunately, and finding it is like a needle in a haystack. But at any rate, if you look on Facebook, how many of you belong to Facebook? Raise your hand. I'm delighted to be your friend. You would have to invite me, but I work very hard on Facebook every night for 3 hours. And I post quite a lot on Facebook. I advertise the Chateau quite a lot on Facebook. Indeed, we love it here. So I know that Facebook has some detractors, but I can tell you that it's been fabulous for my life. At my age, I can do more now than I ever could because of Facebook. I can reach into all corners of the world, and I do have friends all over the world. I've been to France 45 times, and I've exhibited in all the important exhibitions in Europe. And I've made a lot of friends professionally. And Facebook allows me to keep in contact with those friends. Here's a book on haiku poetry, thinking of Abby, our poet here. Haiku poetry meant a lot to me when I moved to California. In Louisiana, you don't think about Japan as much as you think about it here in California. And Basho, the great Japanese poet, became an important part of my life right after I moved to California. I have brought a number of books that I use for reference in my metaphysical graphics. You will see them here in this corner of the room. You hear me talk about synchronicity. There's a book on that, a book on the earth, a book on divination. And for those of you interested in the UFO phenomena, there's some very fine journals here. There's also a book on French Chateau, for those of you, and I know Marianne asked about that. French Chateau mean a lot to me, genetically and architecturally. I was pleased that one of you commented quite nicely about this design. This is my current design in architecture. It is a museum devoted to radiant architecture, which is my work. I kind of invented that term because I discovered that each volume has an energy content. And spherical and conical volumes can be measured as a much more powerful experience than boxes. There are no boxes in nature, as I told my student for years. And you will find that biomorphic structures, that is, more nature-oriented structures, have a much more powerful energy content than boxes. So it's sad that we got off onto the boxes, but gradually, internationally, movement is getting away from boxes, so I trust you will see more of that. In 2019, my university, SDSU, put on an exhibition, a large one, of my life work in architecture. This is the poster devoted to that, radiant architecture. This was in downtown San Diego. Someone asked about French. This is Greek, of course. This collage, the Acropolis in Athens. One of the most powerful architectural ruins in the world. I'm sure many of you have seen that. I don't know if Stephen can. Does that help?
Yeah, stop. Got it.
All right. Now, let's see if there's some more questions, and then we'll move into the next phase of our involvement today.
Gene,
Yes.
someone was mentioning about the collage, about he's a jazz musician. And then there were mailboxes. What was that?
King Oliver, perhaps, right here. King Oliver is very famous, early Dixieland jazz musician. And I am very proud to tell you that my last design in New Orleans was the Jazz Workshop, built in the winter of 1968-69, when I was a graduate student at Tulane University. Interestingly, that Jazz Workshop galvanized the birth of the Jazz Fest, which is held annually in New Orleans now. And this is really good because the younger jazz musicians didn't have a place to play. The older jazz musicians played in Preservation Hall. You may be familiar with that venue in the Vieux Carré of New Orleans. So that did help the balance in New Orleans of young musicians and older musicians. Although I love the old musicians myself. Other questions? Yes.
On the one table that mentions it has the plantation there, and it also says the matrix of New Orleans.
Is it here,
Yeah.
Robert?
Yeah.
Is it this?
Yep.
Okay, it's good that you locked into that. I'll go up by the camera.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yep.
Now, what you're seeing here is a ruined townhouse in the Garden District of New Orleans, as I discovered it in my walks in the Garden District. I had a little studio, an office in the Garden District, and during my lunch break, I would walk around and photograph some of the more interesting places. This old house was really in bad shape, and the owner, when I came across it, was sitting on the veranda, and he came out and kind of confronted two friends of mine and I. He wanted to know what we were doing there. He said someone had been trying to steal his silver. Well, in looking at us rather daggers, we had not been trying to steal his silver. But I think the man probably had a bit of a mental problem. You will find in New Orleans there are quite a lot of ruins, both people and places. And you have to have some sympathy for it. I'm reminded also of the fact that in New Orleans, it's not as clean an environment, crisp, as California. So a friend of mine went to Houston on a trip, and they said that when they got back, they were so happy to be at home where the garbage cans were not as neat out on the street. So atmosphere, I guess, is a factor that we tend to describe environment. If you look carefully at this graphic, that is a drawing I made of the city of New Orleans, where my family's houses were located. And I am really happy to tell you that I have spent many years studying their history. My grandmother was not well, and she never talked about her family's history. And she had the most phenomenal history that anyone could ever hope to have, with 2 or 3 kings involved. Not that I favor kings. I really don't appreciate grown men tottering around in high heels. But my earliest ancestor to immigrate to the United States was actually born in the Palace of Versailles, because his father was the colonel in the guard for Louis XIV at the palace. And he was killed in the French and Indian War. And it's kind of poignant, but his children, to their credit, in the jungles south of New Orleans, started building prefabricated houses for the Islanos. He also built carts for the famous pirate Jolla, who lived near him. Jolla would smuggle his goods on a river that went through my ancestors' plantation. They became friends. Not that I'm advocating piracy. But there is a book in the corner of the room on Lafitte the pirate, written by a real scholar. And that's another factor. If any of you are scholars, I'd like to know about it. Or if you know scholars, I would like to know about it. I'm looking for a scholar to write the story of my family's life in Europe, which is something that is totally amazing. They actually own the Shroud of Turin at 2 points. At one point, they traded 2 castles for the Shroud of Turin. I discovered all of this on the internet, and it's incredible. One of them actually helped Leonardo da Vinci get over the Alps from Milano to Paris and to the Loire Valley, where he spent the last 4 years of his life. And so it would be an incredible book if you know a scholar who might take an interest in this material. All right, now, what I think would be good is if, I'm trying to see what the time is, 2:30. If you would select a graphic in the glassine envelope protector that you find interesting, and we will have those placed.
Gene, if you put them here and I do the TV, I can't record.
Oh, okay.
So you might want to just hold them.
Okay, all right. The videographer is my son-in-law, Steve Laub, who's quite famous in this town for his work documenting musicians. And he tells me that if you select one of these graphics and hold it up to the camera, he can record that, and I can say a few words about each one of the graphics that's selected. So be my guest. Now there are 2 stacks of these protected graphics. There's one all verticals here, and there's one all horizontals here. Or if you have questions again about any of the other graphics, call on me and I will respond. Yes.
Do you have any graphics on the materials from World War II in the museum in
World War II. Well,
museum in World War
the World War II museum, I have been to that, but I don't have any material on that. I grew up in the Second World War, as many of you have, and a child sees the war differently than an adult. It was kind of interesting for a 10-year-old to follow the war as I did, and maybe many of you. In Life magazine, my dad would bring home Life every Friday, and I absorbed it. And child doesn't register on the horrors of it as much as an adult. There is a lot of interesting material, clothing, uniforms, technology, of course. You know, xerography, which is the medium I use for my collages, was developed during the war, and in 1948, xerography was advertised and went into production and sales. And it was good, very good, because you could get a photographic copy of a high quality eventually. And the Japanese took it even more advanced with color xerography. So much of what you see in my collages is color, thanks to the development technology in Japan for xerography. For students, my students, it was affordable, and they were able to do a lot of creative and communicative work because of xerography. This graphic, talking about France, is the region that my ancestors' Chateau in the Champagne region was, near Troyes. And Marianne and I went there and photographed the area. The chateau had been destroyed in the First World War, and maybe that could be photographed. The chateau was destroyed in the First World War, and interestingly, I think my own father was part of the campaign that destroyed his ancestral chateau.
I have a question.
Yes, yes,
Over
coming.
here you have a collage which you titled Metaphysical Revelations.
Where is that? Huh?
It's right over here.
Yes, you will find the word metaphysical quite often in my collages.
And what I
This was in 1993. When I started teaching way back, I taught at LSU in 1965, at Tulane 1967 to 69, and SDSU 1969 to 1996. So I had to start talking. I was a very quiet child. But I had some ideas that earned attention to what we were doing. Earned awards for my students, which really is what allowed me to expand my professorial life. I'm very proud to tell you I taught at 3 universities without a degree. I later got a master's degree. It was the work, 5 years of intense work as a young architect in the jungles near New Orleans, that earned that approval by professors at 3 different universities. You will see that work next Tuesday at 2 o'clock. And I hope you will enjoy that as much as I enjoyed making the work. Yes.
she had a question.
Yes.
So I was wondering, just to help us get an idea of the kind of thought that went into creating each of these, like the one Metaphysical Revelations, what was your thinking behind the items you chose to put in that particular collage?
Okay. Let me get back to it. I think it was over here. Yes. All right. Well, Pops Witzel is the star of this collage. Pops Witzel was a pioneering photographer in New Orleans. He was far ahead of the other photographers in his ability to record life in New Orleans in a very spiritual way. And he earned international attention because of that. So I related to his work very strongly. I always have admired designers, architects, artists who worked at a very advanced level. Le Corbusier, the French architect, was a man that I appreciated a great deal. He would paint in the morning and design buildings in the afternoon. And you will see that this is a side of my existence that's not widely known in the architectural world. And Corbu had a similar problem. He had a hard time having his paintings appreciated in the art world because he was thought of as an architect. And that's sad because he did some wonderful paintings, but it took many years for them to be recognized and appreciated. So it's my homage to a creative artist. There's a lot of, I admire homage, another French term, honoring people who maybe weren't honored in their lifetime. There's so many of them, like Apollinaire, the great French philosopher, and pioneer of creative work, painting. A great friend of Picasso, and you know Picasso, but you probably don't know much about Apollinaire. There are several books on him, though. You might want to look him up. Other questions? Yes. Apollinaire, Apollinaire. Now, I think there may be 2 P's in there. Yes. This one is not hard to talk about because that's my older brother and I in front of our humble little bungalow in North Baton Rouge, which was an industrial area. Although we had ancestors who had a lot of money, my father had a humble income, and we lived in a very small house. But my mother did a beautiful job in creating a garden there. And don't be embarrassed.
I'm not embarrassed.
You know, the lady said, I have a lot of news. Well, believe me, I honor the human body. I think there's nothing more interesting, fascinating, and impossible, miraculous, than the design of the human body. It's absolutely incredible, the design of the human body.
This reminds me of Louisiana because I
Uh-huh.
went to the
Tabasco, yeah.
to the island.
I took Marianne
Oh, we
there.
went there,
I loved it.
Yes. Now, did you pick something out that you'd like to have me talk about?
Well, let's talk about this one.
Okay, well, the,
You want me to go upstairs?
Just flip it around. I can get it from here.
just hold it up, he can film it there.
Okay.
Now, we're not seeing it on the screen, right?
I can't do both.
Okay, so I will just discuss it in situ.
You.
That is Alida Valli, again, the Italian actress who was in The Third Man, if you've ever seen that film, and other great Italian films, who was part of my cinema existence. I was a great admirer of cinema, especially Italian and French cinema. And this is a installation I made at Tulane University with a Christian symbol and Tabasco sauce, you certainly know very well. There's a lot of references to Italian and French places around the perimeter here. So I'm glad you like that. Any other of the collage? This is Alida Valli in another collage where the actress is again surrounded by reference material. Any other collages that you would like me to talk about? Now, Stephen, it's not possible to take the camera around and
Yeah,
video the tabletops.
I can do that.
Okay, and then I could maybe say a few words about what we're filming at the time. Remember, my presentation here is expanded and extended by the cinema that will come out of this. And you can see some of this work on YouTube. Yes, question?
Tell us about your book.
Yes, there are 5 of them here. Facebooks. I'm going to take one around, and it's hard to hold the book and the microphone. As I've said, you're welcome to look at these books, open up and look at the books. Facebook produces these books out of your postings on the internet. They cost about $80 a piece, but they're worth every penny. It's hard to hold the book and the microphone to my mouth. But there is a collage in the Facebook books. And I don't know, they claim that humans don't design the contents, that is, don't organize the contents. But it's kind of amazing how some of the collages come out in the Facebook. There's diverse elements, but they develop a synergy. Synergy is if you have two elements alone, they're not as strong as when they're put together in combination. So here I have a plan of one of my California villas, and I have a very famous anthropologist, archaeologist in the Yucatan, both very adventuresome in their particular effort at that time in life.
Eugene,
Yes.
what is the illustration on the cover of that book?
This is one of my designs overseas. This is for the University of California, Berkeley Anthropology Department on the site of a very famous anthropologist, Dr. Leakey. You may be familiar with Dr. Leakey. And I was invited to design a portable field camp for the anthropology department at UC Berkeley. And that was my design, and you can see that it has a biomorphic, nature-oriented farm. No boxes, in nature.
Reminds me of that one you held up with a whole bunch of seagulls. Loose. Who went over here?
Oh yes, of course. That one is even more biomorphic in that it's not balanced, not symmetrical as this one is. This is harder to do, and it's only ferro cement that makes that possible. There is an Italian engineer who designed the buildings at the 1960 World's Fair. His name Nervi. There's a little town in Italy by that name. A very talented man, and you will find that ferro cement is so reasonable it could reduce the cost of architecture in half. The only problem is nobody ever got a ICBO number for the use of ferro cement. And this is one of the factors that we're faced with in the reality of architecture. I do want to mention my work with bungalows. At the Cove Beach, you may be familiar with the two red bungalows there. In 1975, it was my honor to write the paper that saved those bungalows. And synchronistically across the street from where we live here, there are some later bungalows, very reasonable. The last affordable houses in the United States were bungalows. Less than 1% of the people in this country can afford to build a house. And that's a tragedy in a democratic society. So my effort at SDSU was affordable housing. Interestingly, one of my ancestors in New Orleans built these prefab housing for the Islanos, the Canary Island immigrants that came into New Orleans and developed their own community. So as time goes on, prefabbed housing could help the people who don't have a lot of money to build their housing. Other questions?
It's a fabulous display, really nice.
Well, thank you, and I'm very grateful for you being here today. If you get onto Facebook, you will find that this is just a little taste of what I offer nightly on the internet. And a lot of my friends and former students are out there that I am able to communicate with. And I hope you would be one of those in the future. Any other questions? Thank you so much for being here today. And I hope I'll see you next Tuesday at 2 o'clock, because this is only an introduction to my major effort on this earth, which is radiant architecture. Thank you. Thank you so much.
You see people take for granted today, like in stadiums, the big jumbotrons,
I don't know what those are.
where the action of the football is on the TV screen for the whole arena to see. That didn't exist back in the early 70s. He was having us design it into our projects as an interactive video screen for mass audiences to see. I still remember that. I'm like, oh my God, it came to be. It didn't exist.
He was one of my best early students.
TV was in its infancy, let alone that. And sure enough, I graduated with architecture. I went into furniture design and also interior design, and then ended up in kitchen and cabinet design.
Oh, so you stayed with the theme.
Oh, absolutely. I used everything. And his classes were all about theory, and then you went out and executed it in your own way.
Well, you do work a lot with space
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
and design
Absolutely.
according to space.
Stephen, this is my house in La Jolla. In a book by a Norwegian visitor,
Definitely, yes, of course.
you can see on the steep side, 32% slope.
Well, it was nice talking to you.
4 students helped me build that house.
Okay.
Thank you, Jean.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, Abby.
See you next week, Jane.
Oh, thank you so much. Take care. So this table here has 2 of the Facebook books with my work on the cover, and 1 Facebook book open, so you can see the collages and the photographs in the Facebook book.
Okay, good. I'll send it on along with the
And
presentation.
I mentioned this watercolor I did here in La Jolla, 1967, Beach People. I wasn't familiar with beach people. I noticed almost all of them wore sunglasses. This is good in that it's MUFON catalog, UFO, ET research. I have 2 projects in this book, Visionary Architecture.
It's very reasonable.
And then here's some of my exhibition work right here. Every year I would mount 4 big panels, 4 feet square, of my graphic collages at SDSU. One of the Facebook books there.
Will you take care
Yes.
and get down to the ocean here?
Well, we may after, when we clear out, he has to clear out all this. Oh, yeah.
2 of my favorite historical books, Menton, France, on the border with Italy, and then the villas, the Italian villas, which I did a lot of research as I designed California villas. Graphics for my mail art using xerography and collage. Here's an all color. The Japanese color copy machines Very good.
Very active.
That's nice. Great.
That's over. It's 3:00.
I have that on myself. Actually, I was.
Yeah.
Those are two 11 by 17 collages. The upper one from Louisiana, lower one from Greece. And then my current project for Radiant Architecture Museum and an elevation of my house in La Jolla, first designed for that, 1977. Collage biomorphic structures from ferro cement. These are all vertical collages, 11 by 17. This is my ancestors' plantation outside of New Orleans. That is the Vieux Carré right there, French Quarter, and the entire city of New Orleans here. Shows you how large their plantation was.
Yes, well, I'm still grasping for that too.
Yes, I'm sure you are.
But I learned a lot.
That's probably good enough, Steve. I'm kind of worn out taking too. Thanks so much,
Thank you, enjoy.
Jay. Thank you
Sorry,
for
Mary
coming.
Lynn, but
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
she would have loved it.
Truly sad that they got sick.
I'm just glad they're getting better now.
They do feel better.
They do get a lot better. They're just sort of waiting out their time now.
Yeah.
So that's good. Yeah.
I had this other friend here, Robert, who just got back from Europe. And he didn't get sick, so, you know, luck of the draw.
I was gonna say dumb luck.
Yeah.
Well, an airplane.
Very good, Eddie. I mean, gee,
Yeah.
that was very good.
Oh, thank you so much for coming, Joe.
Boy, what a collection. Wow.
Really?
Well, it's been a good life, you know.
That's great. You're very fortunate then. huh?
Well, yeah, this will all, well, I'm giving
And my
these
son is the
graphics
perfect
to
one
my
to
children.
Who's that?
Although the originals may go to SDS.
Oh, he did that.
My children are going to have the right to publish this material and maybe make some money.
That'd be good. That'd be real good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I gave them a good of money when I sold my house in La Jolla.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd like to leave them something else.
Oh, well, that's very thoughtful. Yeah.
The portrait upstairs is worth anywhere between $50,000 and $100,000.
Oh, that's
And
nice.
Which portrait was that?
Yeah, don't tell him.
Well,
I've been in that.
I've invited you to come see it.
Well, I went in there. I went
You
in
did?
the place, yeah. but I
You
forgot
didn't
which
see
one.
the portrait, the
I
big
did.
oil portrait?
Yeah, I
Great,
did,
great
but I don't
man.
recall it, but I did see it. Yeah, I remember.
He has diamond buttons on his shirt. The king gave him the diamonds.
Oh, really?
He had a necklace, and he took it apart and made, for the boys, the males of the family, these fancy dress shirts. And the
Oh, my
diamonds
goodness.
from the necklace.
Boy, that was a day, huh?
Yeah,
Geez,
world.
Gee, why don't I get a picture of the two of you
Sure.
together, Mary Ann?
Yeah.
The two of you together.
Well,
huh?
that's a noble idea. Thank you.
I think so, yeah. Let's get it here. Ah, yeah. There we go. See?
Yes.
Did it come out okay? I was
What do you
doing
think?
strange things with my mouth.
Oh dear.
Yeah, well, let's try one more.
Let's try. It even says here,
I,
pick a better
I
shot.
won't jump on
It
that
says pick a
line.
better shot.
Oh,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, it takes
Let
a,
me see that one.
That's amazing. No, that's okay.
we'll see, we'll see. Let's do one more. My sister-in-law.
Mary Ann turned out good enough.
Yeah, she did. She did. My sister-in-law, who's an artist, and always takes pictures.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
Is
I
it?
think that's a good one.
That'll pass.
Good. Thank you very much.
Good.
I like it. I
I'll
like
send
it.
it to you.
Oh,
then.
that's a
Do
good
send
one.
that,
I'll
yeah.
send it to you.
Oh, yeah, would you?
Absolutely.
Because
Thank you
I
so
have-
much.
I have people, Mary's.
I didn't,
gonna
oh,
have to
well,
be-
let me send it to you.
Send a picture.
Hang on, yeah, I
Yeah.
do. It's
I
really,
tried to
it's
post
go to the
it.
top here.
Whenever you get a chance.
Yeah, hang on. Oh, I need Mary Ann. And, where'd it go?
That's a good one, I would.
I think that's a really nice one. Yeah, hang on.
I'm gonna pack all
There we
these
go.
up.
Two of them, I think.
No, that's not right. Nah, come on. And share, and there, and. That's where I want to go to. Here we are. Okay, I just sent it to Mary Lynn. Now let me send it to you. I thought I had you and Mary. Oh, there, yes, that was it. That was the one I was looking for. I sent it to you and I sent it to Mary Lynn again. So she's gonna have twice the beauty. How's that? And you want one of you?
Well, there was one that you did.
Yeah,
what's that,
yeah, hang
2
on.
weeks ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, there
There you go. This is the one you liked.
you go. Yeah, okay.
Do you want me to
That's
chop
it.
it up or blur the
Jane-
background?
That's just the
Jane-
way you are.
Jane
Just
and
the way it is?
Joe, this
Okay.
is my son, Stephen.
Hey, hi.
Hi,
how you doing?
Hi, how you doing?
Good.
Oh, you're doing a pro job of
He's
this
got you
here.
busy, huh? It's gonna take a while to do that encyclopedia.
Share, let me see. You like email right better, right?
Yeah, you may.
Okay. There you go. Okay, it is on its merry way.
Now, does this all have to be packed up today?
I don't know.
Oh,
You're asking the wrong person.
yes, I am.
Yeah, but I can
Yes,
do
I
it.
am.
I've done this so many times.
Yeah, but can we help you?
No, my baby, I'd like to see you sit down.
I have been sitting for an hour. I
on.
have been sitting.
Some of these books are heavy.
Yes, they are. Now, where will these stay overnight?
In our apartment.
Oh, they have to go up, huh?
Yeah,
Okay, there we
there's
go.
no security
Okay.
here.
I need to go down and get my hat.
Plus, other people will need this room tomorrow.
Oh,
It's downstairs.
Where is it?
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
bye.